Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another Goosebumps Graphix review. And we're going to be looking at book number 2, Terror Trips. Now, it's been a while since I've reviewed a Goosebumps Graphix. I chose to do the fourth and final one, Slappy's Tales of Horror, a while back when I was doing my Werewolf Review-a-thon. And kind of spoiled myself because the other 3 Goosebumps Graphix feature stories that were in Slappy's Tales of Horror, but told in color. So I've already experienced a Chakra on Shock Street. I've already experienced the Werewolf of Fever Swamp and Ghost Beach as well. So when I get to the books that have, Werewolf of Fever Swamp and Ghost Beach, this one has a Chakra on Shock Street, I've already experienced those. But in these, they're in black and white. And only in Slappy's Tales of Horror do you actually get colored comics in this series, just in case you didn't know. Now, this one here, I think has probably the more solid adaptations. This book, as you can tell, features 3 stories. The first one that's featured in the book is One Day at Horrorland. And One Day at Horrorland is done by Jill Thompson. The second one is A Shocker on Shock Street, and that one's done by Jamie Tolagson. And if you watch my Slappy's Tales of Horror review, I said that one was pretty much spot on, perfect. Like one of the greatest comic adaptations you can possibly imagine for, this Goosebumps graphic series. And even in black and white, I still maintain that. Kind of, getting ahead of myself for the review, but still solid. And then the last one is Deep Trouble, and this one was done by Amy Kim Ganter. And, not my favorite one. So, let's just say this book, right, I think when I review Goosebumps graphics, I like to go into them only looking at 2 things. Was it a solid adaptation? And was the art, the style of it, cool? Did it fit the story, right? And I think Jill Thompson, to start off, I guess we'll get into plot overview. Jill Thompson's adaptation of One Day at Horrorland is pretty solid. It keeps the core story where Lizzie and her brother Luke and their, Luke's friend Clay are in the car with their mom and dad. They're heading out to some amusement park, but they get lost and they accidentally stumble across Horrorland. And here, Horrorland is pretty much done as I would imagine it in my head while reading the book. It's been a long time since I've read One Day at Horrorland, but this is pretty spot on to the book from what I remember. Almost immediately, like you see the car explosion, that's done. You see them interacting with the ticket taker, and they immediately go wander off and try to find something to do, and they find the slide, and they get separated from Clay and have to go find Clay, and then they find that area, and, there's signs talking about no pinching, and they end up into the mirror maze, and, that, if you read that in the book, it's in here. All that's there. It's kind of condensed. You don't really get much of the dialogue. You get the core points of the book, but you don't get much of the humor. The horrors are still in and around the story, right? You see the coffin cruise ride. All of that's there. Even down to the ending where they're locked, into the park, and they're told to go through the exit, and they get ambushed and told, they're on reality television and whatnot, and, they want to thank them for playing, and, Lizzie, there's a whole thing dealing with pinching that was in the book that's also here. It's essentially just the book with the core points, even all the way down to the same twist, when they get home and realize something might have come along with them. It's the same thing, right? It's a solid adaptation. If I had any gripes with it, it's just that Jill Thompson, I think her line work is really cool. I like the way she does facial expressions. I think it delivers a lot of personality to these characters. I think Clay comes across like he has his own distinct personality. He's kind of reserved. He's kind of afraid. Luke, he's kind of a pompous kid, so, you know, she gives him a little bit of attitude. And then Lizzie's kind of like, you know, she keeps to herself, kind of in her mind. She's not really all that jazzed for being there. She's been locked up in the car, so you can tell that she's kind of annoyed. And that's, you know, she's really good at conveying emotions. The parents, she's really good at conveying their emotions. Like, at first they're stunned, and then they're alarmed just as much as the kids are. But I think, like, there's some awkward things in the art. You know, like, there's quite a few panels depicting feet. And no offense to Jill Thompson, but I don't think you can draw feet. They look awkward, and some of the things that she draws, you know, since it's in black and white, you know, it feels really dark, and it's hard to tell what I'm looking at in some of the panels, especially dealing with the coffin part of the story. And I guess in terms of the adaptation as well, if we're talking in terms of just the story, I don't really feel the humor that I felt from the book. I mean, it's kind of there, you know, there are some things that the horrors, you know, say to the kids, you know, you can only die once, you can't die twice, you know, iconic stuff like that. That's in there, but some of the humor just feels kind of absent. And I guess it's from the internal monologue the book had with Lizzie. I feel like it's just really loosely done here. Yeah, this one is mostly fine, though. You know, in terms of, like, keeping all that stuff together. And, you know, it is trying to expedite the story and keep the core points. And I think it kept all the, I guess, the most important. But, yeah, this one wasn't too half bad. It was actually pretty good. The second one is Chakra on Shock Street. Jamie Talaxon, I think he knocked it out of the park with this. In black and white, I think the art really pops. I do prefer the colored version more, but the story, I think what this does for a Chakra on Shock Street, it just makes the story that much better. I think this is one of the few times that you can honestly say that I think a Chakra on Shock Street, if this was like a Goosebumps Graphix exclusive story, this would be a legendary Goosebumps story. You know, starts off like the book. You know, you got two kids, they're watching a movie and they get spooked, and then there's this like whole meta thing. They're talking about Shock Street Studios, and the main character, her dad runs Shock Street Studios. I don't know why I keep forgetting their names. I always forget the names of the kids in the Chakra on Shock Street. Let me pull this up real quick. What are their names? If it even tells me. Josh and Aaron. So Aaron, her dad is like this Shock Street Studio guy, and her friend Josh is tagging along, and they're in this movie theater, and they run up to visit their dad, and their dad shows them this model about Shock Street Studios and how they're opening up this tour, and they want the two kids to be the first to tour, and they're so excited, and they hop on this tram, they head to the park, and they start touring Shock Street Studios, and throughout the story, they just get, you know, spooked and scared. The artwork really pops. I mean, like, I'm just gonna pull up some of this art because it is fantastic. I mean, look at this. When they hop on the tram, let me pull this. What's that? Look at that. Look at that art. That's just terrifying. And they're, you know, they drive through the skulls and they're going on the windy path, and they end up kind of on a hillside and then interact with the Yeti guy who's, you know, asking for autographs. And then they end up in the tunnels and they see the big old worms, and they see all these other monsters that have been featured in Shock Street movies. And the praying mantis is in here. That's super well done. I mean, that art is great. I mean, just fantastic. And like I said, they go throughout the story. They're trying to figure out, you know, how to maneuver Shock Street. They start to think that the monsters are actually real. And they end up, you know, with a twist that it's kind of meta, and it's talking about maybe they're filming them experiencing this stuff at Shock Street Studios. But the two kids notice that they're kind of like plugged in and robots. There's this whole thing about, are they robots, are they not robots, like the book. And Josh heads into this room that says off limits, and, you know, it's dangerous. And, you know, he essentially gets shocked and kind of rendered unconscious, maybe even dead. And there's a big old twist involving the dad and, the two kids. It's a very iconic twist. But yeah, I think that this really makes A Shocker on Shock Street stand out. And the artwork's so good. It makes it so scary and atmospheric. Like, from the line work down to the dialogue, I just think that it takes all the best parts of the book, trims it down and condenses it, and just makes it much more enjoyable, in my opinion. And then the last one, Deep Trouble. Deep Trouble, okay? Amy Kim Ganter, she has this manga style, and while it's not bad here, let me show you some Horrorland art while I'm at it, because I don't feel like I'm doing you an injustice if I don't. The Horrorland art is pretty good. It fits the story, right? You got kind of a dark story, kind of playful, very good at facial expression, showing personality and stuff. Not too bad. But then you get artwork like this for Deep Trouble. Oh, let me pull this up. You get artwork like this. Like a little kid manga story. It's not terrible. This is probably the best panel that she drew here. And it's pretty, it's pretty spot on to Deep Trouble, right? The story starts off with Billy. He's on the Cassandra. He's kind of daydreaming. And he's, playing around with his sister. He goes snorkeling. And he interacts with this tentacle monster. And he gets spooked by it and almost drowns. And he wants to convince everyone that this thing actually happened to him. And he also wants to convince his uncle to keep letting him go diving. And then he accidentally hears, his uncle having a conversation about mermaids, and he all of a sudden wants to help him find these potential mermaids out in the water. And he interacts with the mermaid, gets caught in the net like the book, and, from there, the mermaid gets put into glass, and he wants to figure out how to help her, because, the mermaid ended up saving his life with a hammerhead shark. And the hammerhead shark's even more brief than the book. It's just like one panel of the shark, and that's it. Very depressing. In the mermaid, right, there's so much room for improvement to make the mermaid actually scary compared to the book, and this is what we get for the mermaid, right? I mean, it's faithful to the book, but come on, man. It's so childish. And it still plays that moral story like the book did. It was just talking about, animals in captivity, and how mermaids are sentient creatures, and maybe it's not ethical to, send them to a zoo. Their uncle wants to get $1 million, and, it's supposed to be for the betterment of human discovery and science, but, this is a sentient being here. Like, is it ethical to be doing this? And then, of course, the same twist happens where, Dr. Deep and Sheena and Billy are blindsided by the assistant Alexander. And that whole twist happens with his goons, and they have to go deal with being thrown into the tank, thrown overboard, and then they have to rely on these other mermaids that come to surface to help them rescue the other mermaid that's been captured by Alexander and his goons. And then it's essentially the same ending where, there's kind of unresolvedness, kind of like the book. What happens to Alexander, nobody ever knows. And it just ends on that same hunky-dory twist like the book. It's faithful in adaptation, but when it comes down to the art, I think it's important to wait, especially with these comic adaptations, the style and the substance, right? The substance is pretty good. It's faithful to the book, but the style just doesn't do it for me, man. It's very kid-like. I'm really disappointed that they didn't take the liberty to try to make the story scarier. Deep Trouble 1 is arguably the least scary of the books. And it didn't really try to make it scary, and that's really depressing. So yeah, I guess running them down again. One Day at Horrorland, the art's, the art has its good moments, but I feel like in the adaptation it's missing a lot of the humor the book had. It has its core points, and it does make the more important things stand out, but it feels like it's missing something in its adaptation. And the art style, it's good at conveying emotions. It's good at, you know, I think it does a good job at the designs of the horrors and stuff. But there's really awkward, like, appendages, like feet and stuff, and just, it looks weird, and there's big emphasis. It's kind of hard to see in black and white with some panels, the way it's drawn. It has its flaws. I'd probably give One Day at Horrorland's comic adaptation about a 4 out of 5. It's a very good one. I think it captures the story well. I think it's very appropriate for it. It just has its issues. The second one, A Chakra on Shock Street by Jamie Talaxon. I think this is virtually a perfect Goosebumps Graphix adaptation, honestly. The artwork is incredible. The way it condenses the source material is excellent. It makes it enjoyable. It makes it engaging. I think that visual medium really brings this story out, especially with all the monsters. I think it's arguably even more atmospheric than the book. It's just really well done. And it's creepy. I mean, the art style is just fantastic for this story. It's probably, if it's not going to end up being the best one, it probably will be number 2. I know I've heard a lot of things about Scarecrow Walks at Midnight. I have yet to get to that. But yeah, this one is fantastic. I give this one a 5 out of 5. I do prefer the colored version in Slappy's Tales of Horror, but this is great. Really, really, honestly great. Probably one of the greatest things to ever come out of Goosebumps, potentially, for me. I mean, when I think about the Goosebumps comics, this is the first thing I think about. It's excellent. Now, Deep Trouble. On terms of adaptation, it's very faithful. I mean, it gets to the point, it still has the moral, it condenses the story down, keeps all the core parts of the book that really matter. But the art style just feels really kiddish, and honestly, I'm let down by it. I think there should have been effort to make this story actually scary. I mean, these other two, the art matches the tones of the book. I mean, you have some scary looking imagery in both of these stories, and then you go to this, and the scariest thing you get is essentially just one panel of that. It's a pretty big downgrade compared to the other two. Not by much compared to Horrorland, because it is more faithful in the adaptation, and I do feel like I get the book out of it. But I don't really think it improves the book. I feel like the monologue in the book is better with Billy, so I do prefer the book. The artwork is just too kiddish for my liking. So, you know, since I'm only doing 0.5 increments, I think I'll be fair, and I'll give this about a 3.5 out of 5. I think this is just okay, lower end average good. It's a solid adaptation. Nothing more, nothing less. So if I had to rate this thing from a 0 to 5-star basis, since it doesn't have the fourth story like Slappy's Tales of Horror, I think it really helps this collection. And I think I like it more as a whole compared to that book, so I think I gave that one a 4 out of 5. So this one I probably would give a 4.5 out of 5. This is a really great collection. If you're not a fan of comics, or maybe you've never tried Goosebumps Graphix before, pick this up and try this. I think, for the most part, you're going to be satisfied with this. Especially if you're a fan of all three of these books, or maybe just even one of the books. I think that you might become a fan of one if you didn't like it beforehand, or you might just appreciate the art for what it is. This is a great introductory to the series to try it out. I highly recommend this one. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Goosebumps Graphix number 2, Terror Trips. Let me know down in the comment section. Which one was your favorite story? Did you like Deep Trouble? Did you like One Day at Horrorland? Did you like A Chakra on Shock Street? Did you like all three of them? Which one was your least favorite? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.